of course, they've got him back into custody. So now the huge operation that was in existence around detaining him now shifts into the intelligence gathering for where he was, who, if anybody, he had any dealings with, either before his escape or during his time on the run. And it will also move into a very vast investigative phase so that all of the information can be gathered to see whether additional charges are going to be put to him. And that would be escaping from lawful custody. And what happens is literally they move into a really significant investigative phase now. So actually, although the public won't see anything anymore, the operation will be going on probably for many, many weeks, and it will be very, very intensive. When people escape from prison or escape from custody, they either make many, many miles away or they're caught relatively closely. And to be fair, the fact that he was caught relatively closely tends to suggest that although, again, as I said yesterday, there may have been some organisation behind his escape, and of course you don't know whether he's had any assistance while he's been outside, it would tend to suggest that it was more of a simple escape than perhaps it could have been.
I mean, on the face of it, it was quite audacious, wasn't it, initially, to come up with the plan? And we read in the papers today that he was bragging when he was inside that he was going to escape, but he didn't get very far. I was quite interested in the police language that was used. They kept saying he's not a threat to the public, but yet he's being held on terrorism charges. What do you make of that?
Well, the terrorism charges are due to the fact that there is a belief that he was working with a foreign power, which I believe he was supposed to be providing information to Iran. And then the fact that he tried to, he did plant hoax bombs within an army establishment. So those are the terror charges. When they say that they don't believe he's a threat to the general public, it means that he hasn't injured anybody in the past. He's made no threats to the general public. It's to the establishment, to the state itself. So they would be relatively happy that he wasn't going to pose a threat to the public itself.
And it's interesting because there are some reports this morning that a woman who lives in Chiswick thinks she had a brief conversation with him, actually on a bench in Chiswick on Friday morning. They had a bit of a chat about the weather, and then she described him as gentle and sweet and affectionate towards her dog. He said that he had just come out of the army. We talked a lot yesterday, or you talked a lot yesterday, about communication and the comms coming from the police. You were disappointed that the police, for example, hadn't put out a special helpline number and people were having to dial 999 if there had been a sighting. I mean, there was seemingly no digital footprint, so the police were very reliant on the public in the end to track him down, weren't they?
Absolutely. And I think this is something that people actually forget. They get very, very engrossed, the senior police officers, in the intelligence gathering. They get very engrossed in the investigative side. And what they sometimes forget is that actually communication is the key element to any of the big police operations. If you don't have the public with you, if you don't have the public being your eyes and your ears, then you're losing a great number of opportunities. Thankfully, the public did start to call in with sightings. As I say, the only thing that I thought they could have done better was to get a dedicated line out, because people still don't like dialing 999 unless there's an immediate threat to public life.
Interesting as well, there seems some confusion initially when the police announced and the Metropolitan Police tweeted out that they'd apprehended him. But they said it was in Chiswick and not in Northolt. It does seem like it was a little bit confused in the initial stages after the arrest.
Well, there will have been such great euphoria that they'd actually managed to catch him, that their communications department has clearly just put out the wrong location.
Simple as that. I mean, obviously the attention now moves. There's been a huge police investigation into this over the last 4 days. Will that same intensity of investigation now focus on whether there was inside help or indeed help on the outside? The Mail on Sunday reporting today that 2 prison officers have been suspended. They were prison officers who were actually in charge of essentially where the food delivery truck was and the coming in and the coming out when Khalife escaped.
Well, what happens now, of course, they've got him back into custody. So now the huge operation that was in existence around detaining him now shifts into the intelligence gathering for where he was, who, if anybody, he had any dealings with, either before his escape or during his time on the run. And it will also move into a very vast investigative phase so that all of the information can be gathered to see whether additional charges are going to be put to him. And that would be escaping from lawful custody. And what happens is literally they move into a really significant investigative phase now. So actually, although the public won't see anything anymore, the operation will be going on probably for many, many weeks, and it will be very, very intensive.
And of course, there was much discussion about whether he was held in an appropriate prison, a Category B prison, as Wandsworth Prison is now. Presumably, he's going to be moved to a very secure prison to ensure this doesn't happen again.
I should imagine that will absolutely be the case, yes.
How much of a problem is it? And just talking as a former chief constable, how much of a frustration is it that police work on the investigation and yet prisoners are going into understaffed, overcrowded, poor prisons? Does it frustrate police officers that you kind of do your work and then you feel that the justice system maybe isn't providing the correct environment for prisoners once they have been convicted?
I think you really need to make sure that prisons are funded appropriately. They need to be staffed appropriately. I've been seeing significant complaints from the prison officers associations. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. What can't happen is you can't have people just blaming a couple of prison officers for what looks as though it's a significant failing on behalf of the prison establishment itself. It probably needs a root and branch review of the entire system rather than just trying to paper over the cracks in the walls.
Sue, good to speak to you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chloe.
That is Sue Sim. She's former Chief Constable of Northumberland Police, led that hunt for Raoul Moat back in 2010.